All right. Thank you, Christina, and welcome everyone. My name is Hugh McGuire. I'm the founder and CEO at Pressbooks, which is a platform used by many in the open education universe to publish open educational resources. And I'm delighted to be joined by some really my heroes in the open education space. And what we're going to be talking about is from OER to open press and open impact. So talking about, these are 4 institutions who have robust OER publishing programs of various kinds. They do things differently at each of them, and that's an important part. We've used this term open press as a catch-all phrase for institutions who have developed their programs and are supporting publishing in a variety of ways of OER. And I think what's really exciting and interesting about this panel is we have 4 people who have helped build out this press approach in different ways. And we are going to hopefully get lots of feedback and questions from the group here. I'm just going to do a quick introduction to what we're going to do today, and then I'll hopefully turn things over to my panel to briefly introduce themselves, and then to all of you in the crowd. So to expect, I just want to do, what are we going to do today? Just going to do some welcome intros to everyone. Context setting, so what are we talking about? We're going to do a quick poll if we can get the link organized properly to understand where the majority of you are coming from. And then finally, we'll open it up to a panel discussion right away. So that's going to be just a quick introduction from each of the panelists, and then Q&A from the rest of you on this call. And I would like to introduce the panelists right now. So we've got Stefanie Buck, who's the Director of Open Educational Resources at Oregon State University. Allison Brown, who's a Digital Publishing Services Manager at SUNY Geneseo. Abbey Elder, who is, whoops, apologies. Can I get, hang on. Sorry, everyone. Abbey Elder, who is the Open Access and Scholarly Communications Librarian at Iowa State. And finally, Anita Walz, the Assistant Director of Open Education at Virginia Tech. And as I mentioned, all of these women that are here today are really, I would say, heroes of mine in the work that they've been doing over the years. And it's a delight to be here today with all of these 4 folks. This slide here just wanted to set the context, and the important idea here is that open education is still very young. The idea has been around for a decent amount of time, so starting on the timeline 1969, when the Open University was founded. We've got a number of things happening along the years, but what's really important is that really we're 10 years into, I would say, the real programs that are happening in higher ed in creating OER and publishing. And so a lot has been learned over the years. And I think especially as those who are starting off in this universe, we really want to help give some ideas about how that process went and what it is that it took to get these institutions from a starting point of an idea to something concrete and robust, which is where they are now. And I think everyone here will tell you that everything is still evolving. We wanted to lay out this kind of concept of what it looks like as open education initiatives are maturing. And we had this idea that there are 5 sort of stages. That there's that getting started, which is just about building awareness, discovering, understanding what OER is. Number 2 is building believers, getting the participation on campus, whether that be faculty or administrators. This is really the experimentation phase where people are just trying to figure out what they want to do and what is it going to look like at the particular institution where you are. And then number 3 is really where it starts happening, which is formalizing OER and deciding what kind of infrastructure we want to be using, defining and operationalizing what we're going to be doing. And then here's really where we need to start thinking about important questions like, what are the impacts that we're trying to achieve? What change do we want to see? And then starting to understand better what supports we need as institutions. Once we get through that process of number 3, we're at that advancing objectives, number 4 here, which means let's validate the investments, make sure that what we're doing is making sense. And it's often about supporting the expansion of those initial efforts that we've done, and then starting to look at the impacts, getting a better sense of what we're trying to do and a better idea of the impacts that OER might have that might be and hopefully are beyond just simple cost savings. And then deciding who's leading what are we doing, what are we not doing? That's an important question. What are we not doing? And finally, optimizing impact. So this is about really expanding, about trying to improve the processes that we've got underway, and then really defining and measuring that impact and how we can improve that impact and how do we sustain and maintain. That's the key idea. And then this really becomes a cycle where we're reflecting and going back to the beginning of trying to grow our processes. So we do have a flash poll, and I'm going to ask my colleague Julie to post a link to the Menti poll in the chat, and hopefully this works. Julie, maybe. Whoops! Again, I gotta go back again. Sorry about this, folks. Just do this. Whoops. Okay. There we go. There's a new code and a new QR code. Perfect. So there's a poll, and you can do that at your leisure, but please take a look at this. And this, we just want to understand where the folks are coming from in this talk. And so what is this open press model? The idea here, and I think when I had our prep call, we decided that we attribute this quote here to Anita, but we're trying to blend the best of open publishing with the best of open access. But everyone on our prep call said that could have been anyone who said that. So this is really what we're trying to do as an organization. And the open press, a mature open press, really understands what's the process, the people, and the support around the defined objectives. There's usually some kind of centralized infrastructure for creating, sharing, scaling, or using OER. And there's a readily available path for open publishing, promotion, distribution, and celebration. And so this is really where this group is at. So I am now going to, let's quickly just go back here and take a look at the poll results and just see quickly what is there. So we've got some people at the beginning, some people trying to figure out how to get support on campus, and then a lot of people are in this first stage. So this is perfect. Some people are further along who can contribute, and a few who are at this more mature stage, and finally some are not sure. So this is an interesting distribution chart. So happy to have this. I think feel free to continue in there, filling out that survey, because we can come back to this at the end. So I'm going to start off now looking with a question for our panel. And my first question, I'm just going to ask each of the panelists, and I'm going to start with Abbey, just to do a quick introduction of yourself, your institution, and what kind of program you're doing, where you've focused, and what you're trying to achieve with your open publishing activities at your institution. And over to you, Abbey.
Sure thing. Hopefully everybody can hear me. All right, good stuff. So, hi everybody. Our open education program is interesting. We sort of began in 2017, and since then it's grown from a small grassroots initiative to a cross-campus program with a lot of different pieces to it. In terms of publishing, our open education program publishes open textbooks and other OER through the Iowa State University Digital Press. The digital press began like a typical university press, publishing open access monographs and peer-reviewed journals, but from there it branched out to support student publications, conference proceedings, and then open textbooks as well. The digital press is led by Harrison Inafuku, who manages the back end of our systems and everything related to our journals, conferences, and monograph publications. And I sort of help out. I'm not technically a staff member of our press, but as the lead for open education at Iowa State University, I coordinate with our authors and Harrison to ensure that high quality materials are being developed. So it's sort of weird where I would classify us in that open press model. Are we at a 4 where we've got a lot of things in place, but we're sort of still figuring it out? Are we at a 5 where we've got a lot of things, but we want to make it sustainable? Or are we at what I coined a 5.3? We've got a lot of stuff, but we need to go back to the drawing board and start over with conceptualizing how to do it better. So we provide training for authors on the capabilities of our publishing platforms. We connect our authors to other support offices on campus. And we have a lot of things we're working on right now to sort of support equity on campus without calling it equity because we're in Iowa and that makes things difficult. We don't just use Pressbooks, although Hugh's great to have us on here today. We don't just use Pressbooks for our publishing efforts. We also leverage PubPub for conference proceedings and modular materials. And we have some materials published directly in Janeway as PDFs, like OER that are developed in LaTeX format. So our initiative works with partners across campus to identify a lot of different ways we can develop open textbooks. And I think because we've got so many different ways of doing things with very limited staff and resources, it's an interesting model to talk about. But I'll let other people talk more about how they've developed over time and sort of what they've found in their programs as well.
All right, thank you, Abby. I'm going to turn it over to Anita now. Talk about what's going on at Virginia Tech.
Thanks, Hugh. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Anita Walz. I'm the Assistant Director for Open Education and Scholarly Communication Librarian at Virginia Tech. I've been in this role just over 10 years, which is, it feels like yesterday and 100 years ago at the same time. I was initially asked to explore the potential for open educational resources on campus, which is a really nebulous way of saying, figure out what this could become. We don't have a cost savings mandate. We don't have a mandate from the provost. We are strictly library funded. Our money does come from the provost office, but we support faculty who want to adopt, adapt, create a wide variety of openly licensed, freely available materials that can be used for courses. So we have worked on everything from open textbooks to online calculators to virtual reality to video. We follow a form follows function model. So we look at what is the particular use that someone wants to, what does the thing do that they want to accomplish in their course? And then we figure out what the thing is. We partner with Virginia Tech Publishing, which incidentally started after the Open Education Initiative. And yeah, we use a lot of different tools for the publishing that we do. But I think I'll just leave it at that. And yeah, in terms of where we are, we're somewhere between 3 and 5, and we kind of go back and forth. So thanks.
Excellent, thanks, Anita. I will turn over now to Stefanie.
Thanks, Hugh. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. My name is Stefanie Buck. I am the Director of Open Educational Resources at Oregon State University. Our unit was first started in 2014, and we are a member of the Division of Educational Ventures. This is our latest incarnation, which includes eCampus and micro-credentials and corporate workforce education. And so kind of all the stuff that sort of fits around, but is not really curricular education or credit-based education. We are funded through the Division of Educational Ventures. Our university doesn't really have an affordability mandate, although affordability played pretty heavily into the last strategic plan. We are now on a new strategic plan that doesn't really emphasize affordability as much, but it does emphasize that we want to try and get every student to graduate. So in some ways, it's sort of there hidden in the strategic plan. When the unit first started in 2014, it was very much a free-for-all kind of model. So it was, hey, you get some grant money from us, and here's your access to Pressbooks, and knock yourself out. there wasn't a lot of oversight. And so when I took over in 2019, there were a couple of things that I really wanted to do. And one of those was to make sure we were using Pressbooks to our best advantage, because a lot of the faculty, again, they're not necessarily technically savvy about how to use, and Pressbooks is great, but if you want to do a little bit above and beyond, you have to have maybe a little bit of CSS, HTML experience. And then the other couple of things that I really wanted to focus on were the quality of our publications. So I've initiated things like peer review and copy editing, none of which was happening before, because it's really important, I think, for faculty to feel like they can be confident in the publication that we're putting out, and also for purposes of, say, tenure or something like that, to say that it's a peer-reviewed product. I would say at this point, we do things. I have one staff member and I have 2 students who work for us. One's a graphic designer, and my staff member is my production manager, and he does a lot of the work in Pressbooks. We've tried also very much to provide a lot more faculty support for how to actually write a Pressbook or how to write a textbook, with workshops and things like that, because faculty are not taught how to write textbooks. This is very different from a monograph or a scholarly journal article. There's a lot that goes into that. So we have done that. I'd say we're somewhere between, like everybody else, between a 3 and a 5. There's a lot of questions about the sustainability. We have some textbooks now that we've had for a number of years. And it's like, okay, do we keep those up? Do we take those down? Do we ask the authors to update them? What's the plan? So there's always a lot of that kind of consideration that's going on. And we're really focusing. We have about 50 plus textbooks, open textbooks that we have published primarily through the Pressbooks platform. Some of them are in LaTeX, which of course you just link to a PDF. And yeah, that's our Oregon State. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefanie. And we will round things up with Allison at SUNY Geneseo.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Excuse me. Like you said, I am Allison Brown. I'm the Digital Publishing Services Manager at the State University of New York at Geneseo. So we're a small public college in Western New York, but we are part of the larger state system, which is made up of 64 campuses. So our publishing program started in 2012 as part of a New York State innovation grant. And we are a little unique in that we started just straight publishing. I know a lot of initiatives start looking at adoption and supporting adoption, which we also do. But our grant was specifically to support publishing and create the publishing infrastructure. So today our publishing program is part of the library, and it is located in a trio of services. So we are grouped in with our institutional repository and our digital collections. And so we're able to collaborate and share some infrastructure and coordinate on policies. So that's been good. And that was a relatively recent structural shift in the last 3 years. So our main output is open textbooks. We have an imprint called Milne Open Textbooks, and we are locally run and funded through the library, but we work with faculty authors all over the state. We have over 40 publications at this point. And then along with the textbooks, we do have a author's imprint where we work with faculty or staff at the Geneseo campus who want to work on projects, and then we support a couple student journals as well. So the platforms that we provide are Pressbooks, and we have a WordPress and Digital Commons for our journals. And then for our services that we provide, we focus on the project management, the editorial support in the form of peer review and editing coordination. And then we handle all of the production of print and online in-house, and then distribute the work as well. And then lately, because we've been publishing kind of similarly to Stefanie in Oregon, we're looking at updating editions, sustainability in terms of, updating textbooks that have links that are dying, or professors that want to update their content. And then the other thing we're really looking at is both for second editions and new publications coming in, really rounding out our materials with some ancillaries. So looking at how to provide like instructor resources, including test banks and things like that, and kind of looking at what the logistics are around that.
All righty, thank you everyone for the introduction. So I see there are a couple of questions already. There seems to be, this is actually a new piece of Zoom for me, but there's a Q&A section where I think you can ask questions. So I will pull stuff out from there or from the chat. So if you have questions, please post in the chat or that Q&A space, and I'll monitor both of those things. And the first question is coming from Amy Hoffer, and it's for Abbey. And the question is, could you talk a little bit more about the equity work that you're doing in Iowa?
Yeah, so one exciting situation we've run into recently is that our Board of Regents here in Iowa has set out guidelines for diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we are not allowed to have. For example, people whose jobs are explicitly related to that work at all and not required for accreditation. So finding ways to still prioritize inclusion, to talk about ways that we can support our authors in making equitable materials and advancing support for our students is a balancing act. And I think it's important to address that you can still do that work without signposting it in a way that will get you in trouble with administrators. For example, right now we're working on an inclusive writing guide to support authors in thinking through things like, how do you make sure to provide diverse images? How do you make sure that you're not othering the people you're discussing in your work? Or even in descriptions of it? Do you need to say, oh, this person is a Black scholar? Can you just say this is an important scholar and show their work explicitly and highlight them as a leader in their field? So there are a few things like that that we're trying to push forward, but it can be difficult when you're meeting up with issues from higher up that can change the way that you're doing work, even if it's something that you were starting off much earlier.
Excellent. Thank you, Abbey. Got a question here from Alexa, a very specific question about process for Stefanie. And the question is, how does peer review work at your institution? Do the authors have to look for the reviewers, or does the staff handle it? Tell us more about peer review, Stefanie.
Sure. The way it works is that when a faculty author puts in a proposal, and they can do a proposal to adapt, adopt, or author, and we don't do peer review for adapting or adopting, but we do it for authoring. They are asked for 3 potential peer reviewer names. We like to have, one of them has to be external to Oregon State University. Then I go in and I start looking for additional peer reviewers, because it's you need to have a good pool of peer reviewers to draw on. And so I start looking around for other programs that might be interested in what we're publishing. Usually I try and line up about 15 to 20 peer reviewers. And then I have a message that I send out to them asking them if they'd be willing to peer review this work, tells them a little bit more about the work. And then they can either say yay or nay or recommend somebody else. And so there's a fair amount of coordination that has to happen in order to get the peer reviewers all on the same page. Then I use a document, like a form for the peer reviewers to fill out. And I can't remember who I plagiarized that from, but I'm pretty sure it was openly licensed, so it's okay. But it basically asks them to go through, each chapter and say, what do you think? How is it working? That kind of stuff. And set deadlines for that. When that comes back, I pull all that information together to give to the author, who then has a chance to respond to those comments and questions. That then goes to our editorial board. And this is a fairly new step. We have an editorial board made up of faculty members, and they will review the peer reviewers' comments, and they will sort of make the final decision about whether or not to go forward with the publication. So it's a fairly new process. So there's still, I'm sure, some bugs to be worked out. But if you reach out to me, I'll be happy to share any documentation that I have.
Excellent, thanks. So another question for Abbey, but I'm sure this could go to everyone. How do you juggle workloads providing publishing support while not having that as an explicit part of your job title? And I'm not sure to what degree that fits everyone here, but certainly the juggling of OER work, which is often a passion, and balanced along other responsibilities. So for you, Abbey. And that's from Amanda Larson.
Yeah, very good question. Thank you for asking it. I think what's interesting about our support for OER is it's very easy to say this is important work and we want to make sure it's done well. So I myself have found myself falling into issues where I overextend the work I'm doing to support textbooks and make sure that they are good and peer-reviewed and high quality and accessible and everything else. But what we've had a lot of success with doing in the last 2 years is stepping back from that and rebranding our workflow to make it clear for faculty what are our author guidelines, what is our editorial team doing, what are you doing, and what do we need you to get access to for yourself. So setting in clear guidelines like we will put your content together, but you're not going to just send us drafts as they're done. You're going to have a complete manuscript before we import it into Pressbooks. You're going to let us know who are peers in your field that work in similar areas so we can contact them to perform peer review, so we're not going out of our way to identify people ourselves. We ask that they keep a record of where all their images come from, provide them, and make sure that they're openly licensed, so we're not going out finding or creating images, which I don't know how I did it myself before. Things like that help sort of set standards in place so that you're not doing more than you need to, especially if, like in my case, publishing is not the explicit main part of my job here.
Awesome, thanks, Abbey. Next question here is from Stephen Bell, and I'm going to point this towards Allison, although you might hand it off if you don't, but it's a really interesting question regarding OER, which is what measures have the panelists put in place at their institutions to review open texts at regular intervals to see if updating is needed? Is that built into the publishing process at all? Is it something you've thought about? How do you handle that? And I'll start with Allison on that one.
Sure. So we don't have a official like timeline or cycle put into place. But I do kind of have so we have, very easy to find contact forms and reporting forms to let us know if there is something broken, which usually, so we'll get a alert that something is not working, and that will kind of turn into okay, this has been X amount of time since we've checked this textbook. And so then I will usually employ a student worker to do the very fun job of manually checking those links, because we haven't yet figured out a plugin that will let us do it automatically. And then we also, the textbooks that we know are very, very high use, we keep them kind of higher on our list in terms of how often we're checking things like that. And more often, I'm trying in the earlier stages of publication to, if a website, if we don't have permanent URLs, to try to use like an Internet Archive link through link, so that we start out with an archival link rather than something that we have to update later. So it's something we're figuring out.
Does anyone else want to handle that? Because I think that is one of those great conundrums of the open publishing universe. Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that for a minute. So I really appreciate your mention of archival links, Allison. That's a big bonus if you are including links to outside sources, which oftentimes people are. We do not update our books more earlier than 2 years out. Sometimes people say, well, all these things have changed. let's change things that that are errors, but we really want to look for a finite second edition, because we have people who are at other institutions that are relying on this to be a stable resource. So we don't want to create a lot of changes and a lot of surprises for people. We do look at errata. We have reporting links, reporting forms for people who are to report errors or problems, and we will go into Pressbooks and fix those immediately when there are problems. But we don't have, it's sort of up to the author at this point. Are they willing to do a second version? Do they want to? They usually do have a list of things as they're teaching with the book that they think need to change.
Well, thanks, Anita. Okay, there were a couple of questions here about resources for processes and templates. I think, Abby, you posted, and I'm going to repost it, the OER starter kit for managers, program managers. And I think, Abby, you were the lead on that, if I'm not mistaken, and that's been a fantastic resource out there. So links there.
And Stefanie wrote most of the chapters about publishing, so.
Oh, awesome. Excellent. So that really is an awesome resource. So take a look at another super interesting question, this one from Abbey Childs, which is, Anita talked about form following function in books. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that, and what's the conversation like with faculty?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Abby. Oftentimes people have a particular problem they're trying to solve by creating an open educational resource. Sometimes what they want to create does not fit into the category of a book. And I usually ask them, please back up and let's talk about what problem you're trying to solve. What does this thing do that you want to create? And is it really a book? Because it might be something completely different. It generally ends up being a book, but by asking those questions, I can identify, are they looking for more interaction? Are they looking for things that students can do or participate? What kind of, how does this enable learning to happen? And those are really good questions, because they can drive, what does the resource actually look like? Does it have an interactive code environment? Does it have figures? Does it have manipulable? Some of our data in one of our books has a live data stream that pulls into it, so it's always updated. Other times people want to include things that are like simulations or tools that students can use to change like the PhET sims from University of Colorado. So we look at more of the function of a resource, and then we talk about the form, because we want to make sure there's a good fit. I hope that helps. It's a little organic. It's sort of an architecture way of thinking about things. You build a house to fit what you're going to use it for, or you build a building to fit what you're going to use it for. And so you would build a resource to do what you want it to accomplish.
Excellent. Thanks, Anita. I have another one. This is an anonymous participant. Follow-up question to the equity question that was posed earlier. And this is open to anyone, so whoever raises their hand can tackle it. But does anyone have ideas about how campuses can promote opportunities for more diverse leadership in the field of digital presses and OER, and any activities that you might be taking on in that direction? Anita?
Can I offer two things? Two
Sure.
ideas. One is we have a resident librarian program that is really designed to build a pipeline of people from historically underrepresented groups to work in different areas in the library. So that's one. And then I think through things like the Library Publishing Coalition, there are fellowship and mentoring opportunities that are really powerful ways to get people from historically underrepresented groups more opportunities and an on-ramp to get more involved. I would love to hear what other people have to say, though, about this.
Awesome. And anyone else have any thoughts on the equity question?
I think one thing that you could look into is ways to support people outside of your community. So here at Iowa State, obviously, we're not the most diverse campus, but one thing that we do is that we'll publish books from authors outside of our university. So the digital press will, anything that meets the curricular needs of Iowa State University. So if it's a class we teach, if it's something related to something that might be of interest to our campus, then we'll work with people on developing and publishing those materials. So in some cases, we've worked with folks at Nebraska, Oklahoma, other states to publish books that they can use on their campuses, but we're providing the infrastructure to do that if they don't have access to those resources themselves. And that's one way of sort of giving back to those who don't have access to the materials or resources to get something published officially.
Excellent. I think I've got all the questions so far. So anyone out there who's got more questions, please type in. But I've got a couple, and I will address this, I think, to Stefanie. And I'm curious about how your goals have changed in your open publishing program from when you started to now.
The goals have definitely changed in the sense that we really are focusing on things that are going to be supporting the student learning. When the unit first started, it was kind of an experiment to see what would happen if anybody was actually interested in publishing openly licensed materials. And some of the things that we published were for fairly small courses, and we're really focusing more on large scale courses now, and getting people to adopt things that already exist. Everybody always wants to author because for good reason they want to author, but sometimes that's just not necessary, and adapting is the way to go. So we're definitely pushing that more. We just had a revision of our, what's it called? The core curriculum, I guess, basic education courses. And we're really hoping that we can get more OERs into those courses. And so looking to see how we can help with that process as folks redevelop their courses to fit the core curriculum requirements, if they would be able to switch to an OER at that point. So we're looking more at large enrollment, authoring, or adapting OERs, and looking a little bit beyond the just general savings of, yes, it's great, we've saved the students a lot of money, which is awesome, but also looking towards more of the student learning and retention, because again, our institutional strategies have changed a little bit, or the strategic plan really emphasizes getting students through the process and getting them through graduation. So how can we support that? What data do we need to support that?
Excellent. Thanks, Stefanie. I have a question here for Abbey, and the question is, this is from Kristen Woodward. Do you know if the practice of providing publishing infrastructure for others is unique to your practice? And I think what that means is the sort of approach that you're taking with your other responsibilities.
Actually, I think it might be a response to my last answer about the equity for publishing things from other institutions. In which case, it's definitely not unique. It's basically what any publisher does in terms of, for example, if ACRL were to publish a book and they got a request from someone who's not a librarian, but they're publishing something of interest to the IMLS community, museum library services, then they would still want to publish it because it's something that their publishing output would be interested in. Now, for university presses, there are some that have rules in place saying they'll only work with authors from their institution, but that's not a hardline rule. Really, us just making it clear that we don't do that is done to help authors who might have questions more than for it being unique or different.
Excellent. I will also just, as we're going along here, encourage our panelists to pose any follow-up or questions to the panel as well. So feel free to jump in, any of the panelists. I'm going to ask Allison, a similar question to the one that I asked Stefanie, but slightly different. And it's how has your question sort of what are we doing? How has that evolved over the course of the quite a number of years now that you've been running this program?
Sure. So like I mentioned before, we did start as a grant project. So we had a big like transition at the end of the grant to think about, okay, well, we had all this funding and what is the next step here? You know, how do we make this a regular service to provide? At the same time, there was funding towards the adoption of OER in the entire state. And so we collaborated on starting a statewide OER service. So that was the beginning of SUNY OER services. And so publishing kind of took a back seat. So we had started a pretty specific workflow for publishing. We had this period of time where we shifted focus and we're collaborating statewide on adoption services and infrastructure. And then when that statewide service kind of also got more operationalized and moved kind of out of our campus incubator into the state system, then my role went back to focusing on the publishing side. And so we had these stages of like, okay, we had a very structured time and then we had a very unstructured time. And then, the library really committed to, okay, we want to provide this as a service. We can't, provide all the same funding that the grant provided, but we can, I am the full-time person that runs the program with some help here and there. So they're investing in my position, and we're not asking for funds from authors. And so we were able to, figure out how we can kind of keep the program going. And so I would say, we're still in the stage of like kind of reformalizing some of these publishing structures. So like, for example, just in the past year, I've created a new editorial team. So previously our kind of acquisitions and editorial oversight was different library groups. Like first it was the library leadership, and then it was an OER group, and then it was like a hybrid OER group, hybrid OER publishing group. And so I said, okay, we need, a specific, editorial team to oversee this project. So that was one example of kind of going back to that stage 3 of like, okay, we need to finalize some policies and procedures here. Did I answer the question?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, good.
Excellent. Thanks, Allison. So I think here's a great one from Amanda, and Amanda Larson, I'll take the second part of the question because I know what the answer to the first part is, which is more money, but that's maybe a joke. But here's a question. I'm going to pose this. Who do I pose this to? I think Anita. What would you change if you went back to the beginning of the process? So knowing what you know now, what would you change from when you started your publishing program?
Oh boy. I think I would, what I would do, and probably what I still need to do, is to garner more political support on campus and just to build a broader network of people around campus to say, yes, we are pushing this with you. It was very difficult to start out being the only person who was working with faculty on open course materials, and made lots and lots of mistakes and really discovered I can't do it by myself. So I think that would and still is a really important part of what I am trying to do. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think I could come up with a better answer with a little bit more time.
I think that's often, and I actually think, given this is kind of a nice way to not quite finish out, but I'd like to pose this question actually to the rest of the panel because I just think that's a fascinating one. So Stefanie, if you could go back to the beginning of your program creation, what would you change?
I think there are many things. Obviously, the the one thing that I find has been very helpful is what Abbey mentioned earlier is really setting author expectations and guidelines early on. Because I was unclear, I guess, in my own head about how to write a textbook, because that's not my area of expertise. I'm a librarian by trade. And just really letting the authors know that, yes, you're working with us, but we're not your traditional press. We don't have the support systems that a lot of traditional presses do. There's a lot more that is expected of you as authors, and laying those out very specifically. And so we do that now in the MOU, and we do that in the training. And we do that by having regular meetings with the authors so that we can keep them on track and make sure they're not going off on the deep end, and making sure that they're actually, telling us where they got their images from, and those kinds of things. So there's a lot more hand-holding that has to happen. But I think that that's really important, because we were getting a lot of content where we were like, nope, can't use that, can't use that, can't use that, nope, can't use that. And that was really frustrating for the authors who were like, here's my manuscript, and not being able to use what they had given us. So setting those guidelines and expectations is really important.
Awesome. Thanks, Stefanie. I'm going to take another spin on a similar question. This one is from Kelsey Smith, and I'm going to address this to Abbey. So are there any processes or supports that you tried and did not work that you jettisoned that you can offer as advice to everyone else here who's at various stages in developing their programs?
Absolutely. Things that we didn't do anymore. There are a few things I would say, and really it's not that the offer is bad, but you have to gauge what support you have to put it in place and make it sustainable. So if you have 3 student assistants, and one of them can help with copy editing, and one of them can check the permissions of images, and one of them can make sure that content has citations or attributions back to the sources, that's great. But if you're a single person with a publishing program, then you need to set guidelines in place in an MOU to say, authors, you need to provide sources for your images, you need to cite your sources, you need to provide attribution, and provide training for that onboarding. So training is one thing I would say is good regardless, because at least then you can make sure that they understand the guidelines that are put out in front of them. However, I'm in heaven right now, apparently, with my lighting. However, there is also the importance to keep in mind, you can't offer everything for everyone all the time. So finding what makes sense for you with the people you have on hand is really the balancing act you need to find for yourself.
Excellent. Thanks, Abbey. And I'm going to pass that one as well to Allison. So what things did you try that did not work?
So I will say one of the challenges that I'm dealing with now that I wish that I had either not done or been more intentional, as Abby's suggesting from the start, is how to handle print on demand. So right now I'm in a situation where we ideally want to provide print options for books when it makes sense. But when we first started, some of our faculty elected to have their own separate print on demand account, and some wanted to split royalties. And then at that time, Lulu was anyway, so we ended up with like everything scattered to the wind. And so I kind of wish now that we had gone one or the other. We're not going to provide print, or maybe we're going to provide the files and the authors can handle it, or we just said we're going to do it all ourselves. So that's kind of what I'm saying to authors now, is that we as the institution want to provide that service, so that we can provide a stable ISBN, we can update the files, we're not reliant on their, losing their login or retiring, that kind of thing. And so, I mean, that's just one logistical thing that I am dealing with now, that I do wish we had set up a better system in the beginning. I'm sure I can think of more things.
Excellent. I want to highlight one of the things that Abby said here in the chat. One of the lessons learned is don't let people schedule working meetings to edit their books on the weekend. And I think, again, it talks about one of the things about OER that we noticed from the Pressbook side is how new publishing is to a lot of our clients. And that process is a lot more complicated than you think it is. So I think this idea of clarifying your expectations up front about what you're going to be able to do and not be able to do. I think there's a pretty great panel here you could probably send emails to. We'll show the contact information in a bit, but just to get some advice about that. That would be a really great resource. I throw out to the wind, but how to make that expectations list for faculty. I think maybe it exists already, but that'd be really great. There's
Hugh,
one
may I add to
Sheena.
that?
Oh, yes, please.
I think the thing to remember with that is every textbook is unique. And so you do have to be prepared to be flexible, but it is really good, as Abbey and Allison and Anita have pointed out, to have some fairly specific guidelines about what can and cannot be done and who's responsible for what. Having a style sheet, an in-house style sheet that can be adapted for a particular textbook. So those kinds of things are really, really important. And people are welcome to contact me, but people, anybody here on the panel, I'm sure, has good examples of that. So I would just keep that in mind as you progress, that you really want to be clear, but you really want to treat each textbook as a unique item.
One thing, if I can, one thing that I added to my proposal is a question that asks the authors, this is a big commitment, how are you going to get through it? Like, what are your strategies going to be like, to kind of get to know them a little bit and to kind of gauge whether they really are understanding the kind of work that they're proposing in this book. And the other thing I ask is, what kind of support could be tailored to you to help you through a big project like this? Would it be meetings? Would it just be helping set deadlines, so that I get a sense from the person at the start what what kind of author they're going to be? Are they going to be like, I'm going to be fine and I'm going to have a full manuscript in 6 months, or is this someone that needs just a little check-in here and there? And I think that's something I just started, so I'm hoping that helps me kind of balance the setting a lot of guidelines and processes, but also tailoring the process to the particular author and book.
Hugh, you're muted.
Of course I am. I believe we have 2 more minutes. We're supposed to end at 5:02 to give us time to wrap up properly. So I put the contact of everyone here. I'm sure none of you is too busy to field 1,000 emails from people trying to figure this out. But one of the things I've learned is not only are the OER people running OER programs overworked and deeply passionate, but they're also incredible at sharing their knowledge with others. So I think we will just wrap things up here. It's been really fantastic to have this group. Thank you for all the amazing questions. If I missed anyone, I apologize for that. I think we caught most of the questions there, and fantastic to have the feedback from all of you. And one of the pieces of advice that I've learned recently is when you're running a Zoom call, try to end it a little bit early, because everyone loves to have a few extra minutes. I know there was supposed to be some follow-up chat maybe afterwards. I actually have to run to another meeting, so I'm not sure if anyone else can stay on to host that. But I think I would say thank you to everyone, and we will wrap up with an extra 5 minutes for everyone's time, which hopefully that's good. So thanks to all the participants in the chat and the Q&A, and my wonderful, wonderful panelists, Stefanie, Allison, Abbey, and Anita. Again, I am very serious when I say that you guys have been heroes of mine doing the hard work in the institutions over the years that we've been working together. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with this group. All right, and I think we will sign off with that.